Whether you're in the government sector or the private sector, we're all victims of siloed and short-term thinking. And basically all human systems are nonlinear in nature, by their very nature. So understanding the feedback mechanisms among them seems essential for strategic planning. A couple of years ago, then Mayor of Salinas, Dennis Donahue, came to me and came to NPS and asked if I could think about an economic development strategy for Salinas. Now, what he described to me as challenges, a moribund economy, rising gang violence that was discouraging business development, an education system that was poorly equipped to offer adequate opportunity to a multicultural and bilingual, largely bilingual population, water constraints that limited commercial and agriculture development. I saw as opportunities to create a new model of sustainable economic development. So he also told me about an idea he had, which made a lot of sense, which is try to link the technology, innovation, and venture capital of Silicon Valley with the agriculture industry of Salinas. I told him that was great, but he had to approach this systemically, and the foundation had to be education. So think big or go home. Provide opportunity and prosperity for the local community while addressing the major challenges of our time: food, water, and energy security. I had studied the work that had been done by Harvard economist Michael Porter and others on industrial clusters. And I recognized that regional clusters worldwide all had common components. So they brought together venture capitalists with research institutions. They had a core economic competency for the area, and their education system supported adaptable labor that was tailored towards that core competency. Well, we have all those things, or we could develop those things, and our core competency would be agriculture. They're also recognized centers for a specific commodity. In our case, it would not only be, or could not only be, food production, it could be manufacturing the components of precision agriculture. And they serve as a sustainable source of economic growth and adaptation for the local population. Now, what do I mean by sustainable? Well, it's an educated and adaptable labor base. It's a quality of life that encourages investment. And it's technology applied locally and regionally, but exported globally. So Mayor Donahue assembled a team from Silicon Valley and the local area to develop a strategy to establish a regional cluster focused on the design and manufacture of the components of precision agriculture. This is sensors, robotics, IT infrastructure. Not just to export as a commodity, but to increase our own productivity and to transition our labor force to more skilled and higher paying jobs. That was rolled out as a Steinbeck Innovation Cluster in December of 2012. And I decided to make that the focus of my doctoral dissertation in system dynamics because I wondered whether I could model the component systems of this strategy and provide policymakers a better understanding of how to take this strategy forward in the future. So that kind of begs the question. The systems that I designed were all focused on Salinas. They were validated by the appropriate city and county offices for each system, the data and the structures that I used. The model itself is a system of systems model that integrates these 5 modules and runs them simultaneously. It's not intended to be a predictive model, predictive in nature, but it is intended to enhance our understanding of potential nonlinear behavior over a 25-year period. So basically, the model isn't focused on numbers per se, it's focused on trends. We're going to go to gang membership. This is probably the least complex, but it's going to take me a minute here. This is a susceptibility, infectivity, disease diffusion model. So it's basically modeling the rate at which the susceptible pool, 15 to 24-year-olds, flow into the infected pool, gang members. There's about 800 gang members in Salinas today. That's a mathematic function of the contact rate and the potency of the infection. The infection can be diminished by increased job opportunity, which provides hope for the susceptible group. Now, when I interviewed STEM interns from East Salinas last year, all of them told me that if they weren't vectored into something positive by the time they were 13 years old, in their case STEM technology, they were far more likely to become gang members. Part of the Steinbeck Cluster strategy provides a program called Coder Dojo that introduces kids 8 to 13 years old to computer programming and STEM technology. So I took a feed from that module and I brought it into a group I called STEM Inoculated, so that by the time they reach 15 years of age, they're inoculated and they are no longer susceptible to become gang members. So the other aspects of this model address community work programs and encourage employment and reform of gang members, and then overall violent crime in Salinas, which is a function of the gang population, the non-gang population, and police capacity. And police capacity, in turn, is a function of revenue, which is fed from another part of the model. So basically, the takeaway from this model when it runs is that the blue line is gang membership. So that's diminishing over the 25-year period, as is the rate of gang membership. And that's largely a result of the fact that the susceptible pool is being diminished and police capacity is being increased. At the same time, opportunity for jobs is increasing over the 25-year period. So the key takeaways of this model are basically, I've addressed them, but that's kind of the takeaway. The STEM inoculation is a big piece, and violent crime can be reduced by police capacity as a function of city revenue and job opportunity as well. Okay, so let's go to the water model. 90%, actually more than 90% of the water in Monterey County comes from our aquifers. Those are replenishable aquifers. That water is made available for use each year by a specific yield rate. That's currently about 35%. And that water goes to satisfy residential, commercial, and agriculture demands. Right now, agriculture uses 90% of the water, residential uses 7%, commercial uses 3%. But as we grow over time and we build new agriculture technology startups, commercial demand is going to increase, and as we attract more residents to the city, residential demand is going to increase, and that's going to tap agriculture demand. Now, we have a tiny bit of desalination we do today, and we have a small amount of reclamation that goes into agriculture demand from urban runoff. And a small amount of the water for irrigation percolates back into the aquifers, but the primary source of replenishment for these aquifers comes from rainfall. So what this shows basically is the blue is the water volume, and the pink is the water availability. And what this shows is as we develop new businesses and we grow over time, we start to really draw down the water volume. Until at this point in time when we're really starting to take off, we're sucking the tube dry. So I modeled a policy change that increased the specific yield from 35% to 39%, which, as you can see, increases water availability. That's terrific. We can continue to grow, but we're basically sucking the tube dry. That's a non-sustainable practice unless we've come up with some solution through desalination and reclamation before then. The education model focuses on the flow of kids from high school into higher education, but specifically ag tech and vocational higher education. And the reason this is important is we need that to supply an ag tech labor pool that will incentivize the development of new business in the ag tech sector. Now, the way this works is it's a positive feedback loop. So as that labor pool grows, we develop new companies, new businesses are created, jobs are created, the hiring rate increases, and that incentivizes this key group of kids down here. Those are the kids with access to ag tech programs in high school. That's currently 17.7%. And as the hiring rate increases, more of them will go into ag tech programs, and that will feed the ag tech labor pool. And as the job opportunity increases, kids who had left school are incentivized to go into vo-tech ag programs. They also become part of this thick labor pool and continue to incentivize new business growth. This is the thick labor pool, number 3, and that takes about 10 years to really get off ground zero. That's very important to remember as we go through the rest of this model. This models the investment inflow of the Steinbeck cluster strategy. So investment dollars flow into a general fund. That was initialized at $5 million, and it was expected to grow to $20 million over a 10-year period. That 10% of that is lost off the top to overhead and operating costs. 90% is split between an investment fund for new businesses and research and education. Education in this sense is defined, strictly speaking, as Coder Dojo graduates that go to diminish gang membership, and Kaufman entrepreneurial trainers who become entrepreneurs. Research in this case results in commercial applications from proven technologies. They go into an accelerator to meet up with these entrepreneurs, and they can then offer new businesses to be invested in for startups. Shovel-ready companies can also offer new businesses for startups, but for either of these, they are constrained by the thick labor pool. So until there's a critical mass of people resulting from the thick labor pool in ag tech, there's no incentive for them to create businesses. Once they get investment for a new startup can go three ways over 25 years. It can remain viable, it can be bought out by another company, or it can go out of business. If it remains viable or is bought out, it creates jobs and it creates incentive for further investment. If it goes out of business, this was modeled with 40% going out of business, it disincentivizes future investment. So basically, when you run this model, what it's showing is there's a big buildup because we put a lot of emphasis on investment early on, but that tech labor pool really wasn't ready to encourage the business growth until about the 10-year mark, which is why you see the new business growth taking off right there. And here's what it looks like over time. So that's the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark, 15-year mark, 20-year mark, and 25-year mark. Initialized as I did was 70% of the money going to investment fund for new business and 20% going to education and research. You end up with 28 businesses over a 25-year period, 5,600 jobs, and 450 gang members down from 800. Attractiveness is the big takeaway to this. What this models is Salinas' ability to attract middle to high income earners from 5 neighboring cities with a current population of ag tech professionals. And those cities were San Jose, Santa Clara, Milpitas, Walnut Creek, and Morgan Hill. Now basically, what I said was that the calculus that goes into the decision to move to Salinas is based on 6 different factors, and I weighted these factors. And those are community security, quality of schools, quality of service, ag tech employment, water availability, and cost of living. And what I did was I created a mathematic way to do a ratio of Salinas' score, A through F, 4-0, as the numerator, and the average score of those 5 cities as the denominator, again, A through F. So what I did was I then multiplied that ratio by the full weight of the factor. I multiplied all those factors together because my sense is that if you get a 0 in any one of those factors, you ain't moving to Salinas. So that then resulted in a total area attractiveness score that I normalized. I applied that to the pool of potential migrants, and that brings the flow of middle to high income earners in. So here's what's going on. Why is it important? Because 65% of the revenue in Salinas comes from sales tax, property tax, and Resolution V, and and the middle to high income earners have a huge impact on that. So as middle to high income earners migrate in, revenue increases, police capacity increases, that reduces violent crimes per capita, that increases our community score, revenue per capita increases our quality of service. However, as the ratio of middle to high income earners to the general population increases, our cost of living is going to increase, and that drives our cost of living score down. We really did get an F. We got a 0 in education. So until education, the pink line, begins to take off, we ain't attracting anybody. So we're down here. As soon as education takes off, area attractiveness takes off. When that takes off, middle to high income earners takes off, our revenue takes off, our police capacity takes off. Now what happens here? That was a dry year in a normal distribution. We ran out of water. What happened here? Right here, we were growing at such a rapid rate, we started to routinely draw down water, which you saw in the other model. And right there is where we increased the specific yield rate to 39% to accommodate further growth. So basically, the payoff of this entire thing is a flight simulator that allows decision makers to manipulate certain variables, only things they can humanly change. And a common mistake that's made in regional clusters when they first start is to overinvest initially in new businesses and underinvest in education and research. So that's what I did. I've increased the investment at the expense of research and education. So let's run this. What this shows over time is that the overinvestment in new business startups actually produces 1 fewer business, 200 fewer jobs, and more gang members are the result. Now, the other thing that is frequently overlooked is the impact of public education on developing opportunity and an adaptable labor base that will incentivize business opportunity and will diminish violence over time. So what I did was I simply dialed up the 17.7% of kids in high school with access to ag tech programs. I dialed it up to 25%, and we'll run this now. So basically, That's the only change I made. I put everything else back to 70% and 20% for the other two investments. And what this is going to show is that you would wind up with 11 more startups over the 25-year period, with 2,300 more jobs. It was significantly fewer gang members. So what is all that? At least we can provide decision makers a tool in which they can better understand the feedback mechanisms in these nonlinear systems and then move the bar differently, understanding the systemic nature of the problem. Thank you very much.